Excuse me. Pardon me for the tardiness, ladies and gentlemen. We are live now on the fifth quarter here for the post game show. A little bit of a technical difficulty getting started there, but we're live now. Um, just the dominant, extremely dominant performance by LSU against Mississippi State today, the 41-14 victory. The Tigers weren't really challenged as I thought they would be. If you remember the crosstalk I did with Jack Byers a few days ago, I severely thought that these defenses would hold one another to within a respectable range of scoring. And it didn't pan out like that. It just seemed like one defense showed up and the other one was still like kind of sleep on the bus. You know, we even talked about how we were worried about the 11 a.m. kickoff due to the TV contract and whatnot. That did not play a factor in it at all for LSU, as the team came out, just from the jump and fired off and never stopped. Again, I'm Jermaine Every with Death Valley Insider. I'm an analyst there at Death Valley Insider. As you can see, you can follow me on Twitter, _Jermaine right there. This was just a total beatdown from beginning to end. Uh, the team was almost flawless on both sides of the ball. One of the things, like I said, when we talked about that 11 a.m. kick, we thought that teams would start slow, that the offenses would have a hard time clicking, that maybe the defenses would be at more of an advantage. Similarly to how sometimes things play out in the NFL with the new preseason rules, that defenses are more at an advantage as opposed to the offenses because they need more timing, chemistry, so on and so forth. We thought that that would be an issue for both teams coming into this game. However, it was not. Clearly, it was not for one team, at least for LSU. For Mississippi State, they seem to have an issue. The way they traveled in was very interesting because ESPN decided to show that at the beginning of the game. The team left this morning from Baton Rouge and rode in instead of, traditionally flying in the day before, driving in the day before, kind of getting settled and waking up, taking a bus from the team hotel to the arena or stadium, sorry. They drove in this morning, stopped halfway through. Coach Kelly let them out to stretch. Once they got out stretched at a car lot, they walked around, kind of got loose a little bit, got back on the bus, and then for the last 30 minutes or so of the ride, he let them turn the music up and kind of get loose a little bit. Typically, he doesn't want them to get too turned up too far before the game. However, because it was an early kick, circumstances were different, travel was different, he went ahead and allowed it. And it seemed like that little bit of a difference in travel, that little bit of a change in the routine to adjust to the time schedule and the kickoff, looked like it really paid dividends because the team started well, finished well. They played a complete game, all 60 minutes. They did not let off the gas at any moment. There may have been a few flashes here and there of some undisciplined play or what have you, but for the most part, this team started off strong, stayed strong, and finished strong all the way through the game. Uh, the first thing I noticed just in the first drive, um, that Mississippi State was using three down linemen for the most part, which is more of a traditional front now in college football. Most teams play some version of a 3-3-5 or a base 3-4 even, or they play some sort of nickel or dime defense with basically only three down linemen. However, I started seeing where Mississippi State would actually put four down linemen on, or at least show four down linemen. Then they would switch to that when it was obvious passing situations. They were also trying to blitz Jaden Daniels in order to kind of move him off his pivot and kind of give him a little bit more of different looks and whatnot in obvious passing situations, such as like 1st and 10, 2nd and long, or 3rd and long, which luckily LSU was not in those situations very often. Uh, we also saw just the blitzes and them trying to also disguise said blitzes. There were times where they would show the four down linemen. One of the down linemen, preferably more than likely one of their ends, would drop back in coverage, and they would either send a DB, a linebacker, and or both of those guys, or one of the two of them, and come in for the kill. trying to blitz him. They even blitzed up the middle. They would blitz off the edge. They were disguising the blitzes, zone blitzes. They were just trying everything at certain points in this game to try to throw Daniels off his pivot, and none of it worked. He started off 13 for 13. He didn't have his first incompletion until there was a 126 left in the, I believe it was, give me a second, let me check my notes here. Yeah, it was 126 left in the first quarter is when he threw his first incompletion. So he was on fire for this whole game. He didn't throw his second incompletion until there was 10:51 left in the third quarter, which was the towards the end of one of their first drives in the third quarter. Uh, Up until and that was back to back plays, actually his second and third incompletions of the game. At that point, he was 23 of 26. So just to go to show you how well he was performing at that high of a level. So he was really on point. I really loved his game, his smoothness. The announcers even made mention of how he says he felt more comfortable with his pocket presence going into this season. And that clearly showed in a game like today, where no matter what Mississippi State did, whether they threw three down linemen, four down linemen, they blitzed them, with man, sending zero blitzes, or they blitzed him with zone blitzes. It did not matter. He stayed calm under pressure. He took off when he needed to, not unnecessarily. He didn't take any unnecessary chances. Henceforth, such the great passing game that he had. He ended the game 30 of 34 for 361 and two touchdowns. Again, like I said, he was, I did not look for him to be the team's leading rusher yet again in another game, but he ran the ball 15 times for 64 yards and two more touchdowns. So another two touchdown throwing, two touchdown passing, multiple touchdowns in the game for Jay Daniels. This was another game where he took another step forward, proving why he was the second betting favorite heading into the season as far as winning the Heisman Trophy is concerned, behind the incumbent Caleb Williams over in USC. He's a playmaker, whether it's with his arm or with his legs. And when they talked about how he came back and he didn't think about going into the draft or anything because the prospects weren't great. One of the things that he worked on, like I said just a little while ago, was his pocket presence. And you can see it when he's throwing into the face of a blitz or he steps to the side, just slight motions in the pocket, whether it's to his left, to his right, backwards, forwards, just the slight motions in the pocket for him to change his trajectory point and still throw an accurate ball down the field is something that the NFL looks at when they're looking at, can you make throws? It's not just your arm strength, because one of the top things that they look for in a quarterback is accuracy. It's not arm strength, it's accuracy. But also, can you stay calm in the face of pressure? Can you stand in the pocket? Can you make those throws accurately down the field, different parts of the field, different levels of the field, even when there's somebody in your face, when there's somebody barreling down on you? Do you know how to check down and look for your different receivers and whatnot? And he's exhibiting that, very well. A game like today, where I thought that a defense who looks more similar to LSU's defense, just like Florida State did, except this game, not only did they protect him, but they also they ran the ball very well. LSU ran the ball a total of 39 times for 163 yards. It's only a 4.2 average, but the fact that they stayed committed to the run and they weren't very unbalanced because they only threw the ball 37 times compared to their 39 runs. So when you look at the balance of their offense, they're not too heavy one way or the other. They actually kind of hit you from both angles. Now, some of those 15 rushes that Jay Daniels had were not all designed runs for him to just take off and run. Some of those were, yes, in fact, he dropped back to pass, didn't see what he wanted to see, saw an alley to run, and decided to take off with it. Hey, that's great. I'm not I'm not going to complain about that. Especially there was a play, I believe it was in the third quarter, one of the opening plays of the second half. He took off because he looked downfield. None of his reads were open. and you can see he scanned the field, looked like left to right. He didn't see anything open. As he looked back to his left, he could see an alley just opened up because they were playing pretty much man coverage. So once he saw that alley to his left, he just tucked the ball and took off, 23 yards up the sideline. That was the play where he also took the unnecessary hit. Uh, he showed signs of getting out of bounds or sliding, but that was the play where, for whatever reason, he decided to take off and take on, I believe it was Sean Perkins or Sean Peterson. It was just a crazy play because there was no need for him to try to do that. He took off, got hit in the chest, and there was a Sean Preston. I'm sorry, Sean Preston Jr. There was a targeting call because Preston led with the crown of his helmet. Now, I know some Bulldog fans would be upset with that, but you got to live with that kind of play because the rule clearly states if you lead with the crown of your helmet, then they're going to call that play. They're going to throw that flag. It's going to be something that the referees have to pay attention to because if the flag is not thrown, if that call is not made, now those guys are getting marks against their record because they didn't call the penalty to the true nature of it. So you got to understand that sometimes there's going to be calls like that where, yes, Jane Daniel did kind of jump into him. However, Preston basically, instead of him leading with his head up and shoulders out, he led with his head down and shoulders tucked. So that led him to lead with the crown of his helmet in the form of the tackle. It's a bang bang kind of play. I know some people may not like it, just like the play the other night with the Eagles and the touchback with the Eagles and the Vikings. Uh, there are rules in place in football. You just have to abide by them. And it's a tough play because it's an instinct kind of play. You're just going in to make the tackle, thinking that you're putting your head down and you're trying to square up, thinking that you're going to hit him in the chest and with your shoulder, and the way he moves and reacts, and now you're hitting him in the chest with your helmet, the front of your helmet. It is what it is. Bottom line for LSU, Jane Daniels needs to, you know, slide more, get out of bounds more. Those extra couple of yards aren't always worth it. So I was happy to see him, make those kind of plays. He was making plays with his arms and his legs this game, but those kind of plays he has to learn how to eliminate. Other things that we saw was Malik Neighbors just he was playing out of his mind. He was literally putting up video game numbers. If NCAA football had come out, this summer or last summer like it was supposed to, one could get on the game and play with Malik Neighbors and see how good he actually is, and he could probably put up those type of numbers in an actual video game. But 10 catches for 188 yards and a touchdown in the first half was absolutely insane. And it shows why he came into the season with the hype that he had. And everyone, when they would ask about LSU's wide receivers, they would say, okay, who else besides Malik Neighbors? Because everyone else wasn't very well known. It was just Malik Neighbors and everyone else. It was almost like that scene in The Temptations where David Ruffin comes in and he says, I'm David Ruffin, and these are the Temptations. That's kind of how people looked at LSU's wide receivers coming into this year. It's Malik Neighbors and the rest of them. However, Kyron Lacy and Brian Thomas Jr. especially, Chris Hilton, those guys have all stepped up and shown that, hey, there's some other really good talented wide receivers here on this roster. But 10 for 188 and a touchdown in the first half. And it was very close to being 10 for, 206 and two touchdowns because his last catch, the 48-yard bomb that he caught, got stopped on the 18-yard line. He actually had the guy beat. And by the time Jaden saw him, he was actually having to slow up to catch up to the ball because Jaden was trying to drop it in there. And instead of him leading him, he kind of just dropped it in, between the corner and the safety. It almost looked like cover two, but it was cover two man. Just the slight double move that Malik put on the corner had him turned around. And he created so much separation that by the time Jayden looked back over there to him, he was wide open. So if he could have led him a little bit more, and thrown the ball a slight bit further upfield towards the sideline, that could have been another touchdown. However, they did end up scoring on that drive, so all is well in Baton Rouge. But it was just an unbelievable game by Malik. he stepped up and showed why he was the focal point of this offense coming into the season as far as pass catchers is concerned. Brian Thomas Jr. also had another productive game. He had 7 for 60. Logan Diggs stepped up and did some amazing things. He caught 3 passes for 30 yards in the pass game and also had 9 rushes for 41 yards. Kind of ran the ball really hard, looked really good. But Caleb Jackson, the bowling ball of a freshman, had an amazing play in the third quarter. He gets the handoff, takes off around the left end. He stiff arms a defensive lineman, first off, to make sure he broke free. Uses his burst and acceleration to hit the sideline and absolutely ran through a defender. And he was so in the moment. I guess he didn't even realize he was out of bounds because after he bowls over the guy, he kind of stands over him and looks at him, and then another linebacker comes and takes him out and hits him out of bounds. And it's like, Caleb, keep going. You're not out of bounds until you hear the whistle. Play through the whistle. But I guess Caleb was just admiring his work a little bit too much, stood there and got popped. But he got right back up. But that play legitimately reminded me of a Leonard Fournette play. Specifically, I want to say it was against Auburn or Ole Miss. But when Leonard bowled over the guy, he just kept going. He did not stop at all. But Caleb has that kind of big play ability because not only is he, a 225-pound bowling ball, but he also has the acceleration to get to his top end speed very quickly within a few steps. Acceleration and speed are two different things, also. Just really quickly, because I was talking about this with another buddy of mine this weekend. Matter of fact, it was yesterday on radio. We were saying because people oftentimes confuse speed and acceleration. High end speed means you're really fast and you're getting from point A to point B very quickly. Acceleration just means how quickly do you get to your own top end speed. So, like, let's say if a guy who's really fast tops out at 20 miles an hour, but it takes him a while to get up to that 20 miles an hour. He's very fast, but he doesn't have good acceleration. Let's say there's another guy who only tops out at about 18 miles an hour. However, he gets to that 18 miles an hour within 3 steps. He has very good acceleration, just doesn't have very good top end speed. Those are two different things that people need to keep in mind when looking at speed and acceleration as far as the player is concerned. Now, Caleb Jackson, he does have very good speed, but he also has very good acceleration. You combine that with his 225-pound frame, his fearless, aggressive running style. That's what really reminds me of Leonard Fournette. I can't wait to see that kid get more carries. Logan Diggs did a great job. Caleb Jackson did a great job. Josh Williams came in, had a few runs. Noah Kane had some runs. So the guys were spreading the ball around, and it's going to be more of a running back by committee and just a situation here or there. Who do we feel like putting in the game and calling which plays as far as the running back situation is concerned? Traditionally speaking, LSU has had a main guy, like a star, and then a couple of co-stars. And this is more of an ensemble cast where you have a bunch of really good players, and they're all going to get touches. They're all going to get playing time. It just depends on the opponent, the situation, and how the flow of the game is going, depending on which one of these guys is going to get the most touches from game to game. But in this game, as far as what I saw, Logan Diggs and Caleb Jackson are two of the guys that should be getting most of the touches moving forward. Diggs showed some good things in the run game and the pass game. And Caleb Jackson is just an exciting player who he looks like he could take any play of the distance, whether he's going to run by you or run over you. So I would really love to see those guys kind of get more involved in the run game. A little bit less Jane Daniels, but I get it. I understand he's so good and so talented that sometimes he's going to be the team's leading ball carrier. Would I like to see the running backs get the bulk of those carries? Yes, because that would take some wear and tear for Jade himself. However, when you have a guy who's so head and shoulders good and above everyone else on the field, and he's such a good playmaker, and he's not only good when he runs the ball, but he has figured out he's unlocked that next level of knowing when to run. Because being a good athlete, being fast, very elusive, and whatnot, it's good. but it's also knowing when and how to use that skill. And he seemed to unlock that next level of it this year. Last year, he showed a good mastery of it, but it seems like this year he's not just tucking and running with it just because. He's actually scrambling around, looking to extend the play, looking to get guys open, letting them break off their routes, and you know, hey, fire, fire, fire. The old called when it's a live ball, but he seems like he's figured it out and knows exactly when and how to take off with the ball. Perfect example was that play I talked about earlier. He looked downfield, he scanned the field really quickly, looked through a few reads, he saw a lane opened up, boom, he took off and ran with it. That was great. Uh, the play early in the third quarter where he took off and ran with it, I'm sorry, the exact same play. He has to learn how to get down and not take those shots. So he's adding and adding different layers onto his game as you see him progressing through his career, especially last year and this year at LSU. From his time at Arizona State, when I used to watch him play those Pac-12 games late at night, he was more of an athlete playing quarterback. Now he's transformed himself and has added layers to his game where he's a good quarterback who happens to be a good athlete. So he's really made that transition from you know, primarily speaking, looked at being an athlete to primarily looked at being a quarterback who's also a good athlete. The accuracy, the pocket presence, stepping up, scanning the field, making calls, and seemingly making checks in different plays looks like, even with help from the sideline. But it just looks as if he has a mastery and a control of this offense, and he's just so in tune in what's going on with his teammates and his coaches that you can see why he's going to be in the Heisman race continued all season. That first game is going to be a blip on the radar if he keeps playing like the way he's played these last 2 weeks. Even in the Florida State game, I think he played very well outside of, you know, a couple of brain farts here and there, especially with that interception, a couple of other plays where he missed time some throws and overthrew some guys here and there. Nerves, jitters, whatnot. Being the first game, you're playing against, you know, high level competition. You're trying to, you know, make a good showing for yourself and your team. So there were a few plays here and there. I know he wished he could have had back in that game. Uh, Minus a few plays here and there in that Florida State game, he's played very well all season in all three games so far, and continuing to play well down the stretch in the middle of this season, in the bulk of this season, when you're going to come up against some high level competition. It's only going to continue to add to what he's already done and what people already know is that this kid is a real true NFL prospect. He has the tools, he has the skills, he has everything that you're pretty much looking for in a quarterback. He just needs to show, like, okay, what do you want to see from me this week? What do you want to see from me now? I'm adding these different layers to my game. You know, yes, I'm fast. Yes, I can take off and run with the ball. Yes, I got good arm talent. But hey, look at me hang in the pocket. Look at me extend the play. Look at me step up and make that pass. Look at that crossing route where I place it just over that linebacker and into that empty spot of that zone. Look at me place that dig route, you know, right in front of the safety, in between those two linebackers playing that cover three defense on that side of the field. You know, look at me look check down and hit my running back on that little comeback route or what have you coming out of the backfield, or hit that shallow drag route going across the field because I know I don't have it, you know, mid, deep, or what have you. So he's continuing to show why, yes, I'm a Heisman favorite, but not only am I a Heisman favorite, but I'm a candidate to get drafted in next April's draft and you know, be someone who can actually play and take his talents to the next level. This defense was just unbelievable. I mean, I can't even begin to talk about how scary that defense actually looked. Yes, Mississippi State is transitioning from the fun and gun offense to a more run-based offense. However, they still have a lot of the spread uh, principles and a lot of the shotgun and pistol formations in their playbook. They tried a little bit to take advantage of LSU's past defensive woes that they've had this year, and it just did not go well for them at all. At one point, I believe it was through the third quarter, they had 7 completions and 6 punts. So they had 7 completions and 6 punts. that just goes to show you how dominant this defense was. Uh, to further it, after the first quarter, the Bulldogs only had 5 total yards of offense. There was one point, I believe it was at the 6:08 mark, right before halftime, about 6 minutes before halftime. The Bulldogs had 16 total plays for 7 total yards. So, just some of the things that I'm worked up and looked up already to put in the by the numbers article that I'm going to write and get posted to the website as soon as possible today. But just this defense, it looked so dominant. And I knew this defense would look good, but I thought that Mississippi State had a chance to kind of take advantage going back to some of their old passing principles. It just was not to be. Will Rogers was under pressure pretty much the whole day. Uh, and he didn't have time to throw. And when he did have time to throw, it didn't really go anywhere and it got broken up easily. There was a couple of plays. I think Mississippi State's biggest play was Jaquavius Marx's 52-yard run. He broke that run because Zy Alexander missed a tackle. As he missed that tackle, he got a good block downfield. He just took off up the sideline. There was nobody close enough to cut him off at an angle until he was, halfway down the field, literally. So that was their biggest and best play the whole night. And I mean, if you just take a glance at what they did as far as their total yards is concerned, they had 201 total yards. 25% of their total yards came on that one run play. 25% of their total yards comes on one play. That's not a good sign. It's in fact a disaster. They eventually went 12 of 29 passing, so they got a few more completions, but most of them were towards the end of the game when the game was already decided. LSU was playing pretty soft. Uh, there were the penalty watch this week for LSU. LSU had more penalties this week than they've had all year. Their first 2 games, they only had 4 penalties accepted, I believe, for about 60 or so yards. This week, they had 6 penalties accepted for 50 yards alone. So there was a lot more penalties, not very many yards, but still, 6 penalties in the game when they had 2 in the first game, 2 in the second game. It's kind of not what you want to see, but the good thing is that they were so far ahead and so dominant in this game that those 6 penalties for those 50 yards that did get accepted and enforced, it didn't even matter. The defense again was just totally, totally, totally dominant. Harold Perkins Jr. really stood out again himself, literally playing all over the field. He had plays where he lined up in man coverage and followed guys in motion out wide. He had plays where he came off the left end. He had plays where he came off the right end. He had plays where he played in the middle, the linebacker spot. He had plays where he played nickel cover. I mean, just it seemed like I had an inkling of a feeling that they were going to play him in these different positions throughout the year, just depending on the matchups, the teams, so on and so forth. One of the things that I'm noticing is that they're using him in a myriad of different positions simply because he's that good of an athlete. He's just one of those type of players where no matter where you play him and where you put him, he's going to put pressure on the defense some way, somehow. He's going to cause a matchup nightmare for you where you're going to be getting up, lined up for snap, and you're looking for number 4. You're pointing him out. However, the scariest thing about it is that he's lined up at rush in and has either rushed or dropped back in coverage. He's lined up, at linebacker and then went at man coverage. He's lined up at linebacker and has blitzed. It's just you never know what they're going to do with him on any given play. You just know watch out for 4 and see what he's doing. It's he's one of those guys where I wrote it in my notes where I kind of compared him to Patrick Willis, except he's about 10, 20 pounds or so lighter. Where Patrick Willis was the kind of guy who was just an athletic freak. He was stronger and faster than just about everyone else. And he could line up and play anywhere and do anything you needed him to do. Although middle linebacker was Willis's, main position, he would play outside. He would play rush in. He would cover guys. He would drop back in coverage and play like a pseudo safety position from his linebacker He literally lined up everywhere and could do almost anything on the field. One of the funny things that people do to kind of compare things is like you'll look at something arbitrary like a Madden rating or something like that. There was a couple years in Madden where you would put Patrick Willis at literally any position on the defense, and he was no less than like a 90 rating at any position on the defense. That's Harold Perkins Jr. He literally plays everywhere on the defense and excels everywhere they play him on the defense. He got a lot of help from some of his teammates this game because a lot of those guys really stood out. Uh, just the way that they swarmed to the ball. There was a few missed tackles, so that was still an issue. But one of the plays that really stood out to me was towards the I highlighted it. It was in the third quarter. Bulldogs offense was scrapping away. They were trying to, come back and get back in the game. And Major Burns blitzed from his safety position. He came just crashing down, time to snap pretty good. The running back swooped over from the left side of the line to the right side to try to pick up that blitz. They meet. As they meet, Major Burns just simply bowls him over, similarly to the way Caleb Jackson rolled over that poor kid on the outside on his outside run. I mean, just knocked him over. Will Rogers didn't stand a chance. He tried to make a move. Burns tracked him down and sacked him within a few steps. That kind of play that you get from one of your safeties, and those two guys have been lauded, all year and were looked at as major key pieces to this defense, especially given the influx of transfers and guys from transfer portal playing corner. To have guys like he and Sage Ryan back there is huge for this defense because you get some veteran leadership and direction in that defensive backfield. But that play right there really stood out as what other guys have stepped up and played huge on this defense in this game. Uh, Another one was Makai Wingo had a couple of good plays where he had a tackle for loss. I believe it was a sack or he stuffed the run or so. I remember he just as quickly as he got through the line, he reminds me of those, kind of shorter three techniques that shoot those gaps and get off of blocks very quickly and kind of use their shorter stature as leverage with their combined with their quickness and their strength to bust up run plays and get to the passer on pass plays, push the pocket. So I'm really loving what he's doing. Uh, didn't hear much from Mason Smith this game, but just seeing him out there on the field playing, getting his snap count up, getting back into football shape was good to see. So that was a pleasant sight as well. Just overall, this team looked really dominant, and I was really happy to see the way they played this game because the first game was that shock to your system. You're playing another top 10 team. Even though the score looked the way it did at the end of the game, if there could have been a few things that had gone differently at certain times of the game, that game would have been either much closer or it could have actually been a win as well. Uh, Last week was a get right game. You're playing an in-state inferior opponent, FBS school. I'm sorry, FCS school, coming into your home place, playing at night. Opening home game of the season. You need a sacrificial lamb to kind of get back right and get back on the right track. And that's what they did, dropping 72 on Grambling last weekend, and kind of got the confidence back, got some things figured out, and got the system, going. This week, you're opening up conference play on the road, 11 a.m. kickoff. Not ideal to open up conference play, a division opponent at that, against a tough team who's always going to play you tough and isn't going to just lay down and roll over. And you came out smoking from the beginning to the end. So going into next week, you're playing Arkansas, a rivalry game for the Golden Boot. Arkansas is not going to lay down either. They're going to play you tough as well. It's another SEC West opponent who they know you know them, you know what's coming. So for LSU to have back-to-back dominant performances after pretty much getting dominated in their first game of the season, excuse me, this team is now on the right track. they're hitting their stride and they're putting everything together, offense and defense. Another thing I noticed is that this game there were no turnovers on the special teams. Special teams turnovers tend to kill this team in big games. Uh, Last year against Florida State, this year against Florida State. Believe they had a turnover or so on special teams last weekend. There were no fumbles this game. There were no interceptions thrown this game. No turnovers. So to me, I take when I look at turnovers, penalties, and all that kind of thing. I'll take a game where the quarterback is the leading rusher again. The team only averages 4.2 yards a carry. There's 6 penalties for 50 yards, but there's 0 turnovers. That right there, that 0 turnovers is huge, especially when you get the other team and they don't really turn the ball. So when there's no real turnovers to speak of in a game and there's no other way to look at like let's just say you can't watch the highlights for some reason. You're just looking at the numbers and stats and you're trying to get a hold of this game and you're looking at it and you're like, well, there's no turnovers in this game. The one team clearly dominated the time of possession. LSU had the ball 38 minutes and 39 seconds compared to 21-21 for Mississippi State. Well, I thought you said they only averaged 4.2 a carry. Yes, but they ran the ball 39 times. So if you're averaging 4.2 a carry on those 39 carries, it's a lot of 3 yards in a cloud of dust. It is what it is. You keep the chains moving, you keep the ball moving, you keep the defense honest. That's how come you open up over the top and you have that kind of success throwing the ball to Malik Neighbors and crew going over the top. You look at third down efficiency. LSU was 9 of 16. Mississippi State was 3 of 13. Fourth downs, LSU was 2 of 2. Mississippi State was 2 of 3. However, it did not lead to very much of anything. Fourth down. Total yards, LSU had 530 to Mississippi State's 201. So you look at the game and you're just like, okay, I see what happened here. LSU basically was able to move the ball and dominated, their offense with Mississippi State's defense, whereas Mississippi State's offense could not do anything with LSU's defense until the end when it was checkout time. So another impressive win back-to-back weeks for LSU. Again, like I said, they go into next week's matchup against Arkansas, fired up, ready to go. I'm looking forward to seeing what this team is going to do next Saturday night against Arkansas because that's typically a fun game to watch, especially with it being at Tiger Stadium. This team has gotten themselves going now. It's a night game. It's Tiger Stadium. It's still going to be light at kickoff, but sometime there in the second half, lights are going to go down. The darkness is going to come. Lights are going to flick on. The stadium is going to get louder and crazier. People are going to go nuts. So I'm looking forward to seeing that game because it's a rivalry game and it's typically a very hard playing game. But I'm not going to get fooled into picking Arkansas to get within the number. I'm not seeing an opening line on it as of yet. But if that line is somewhere within the 20 or less range, I'm taking LSU in the points on this week because I just do not see where they're going to falter 2 weeks in a row. I just don't see where they're going to stop looking as dominant as they are. I just believe that LSU is going to continue their dominance. They're just going to keep things going. They're going to continue to roll next week. So look for another dominant win next week against Arkansas. I expect it to. It could get ugly, but KJ Jefferson may keep it within the number, honestly. But just as dominant as LSU has been looking, and it looks like Arkansas has been struggling kind of on offense, especially with the run game. They can't really run the ball very much this year, only averaging about 45 a game. I'm sorry, they're averaging 343 a game total yards, about 138 on the ground, 205 through the air. Their run defense is actually only giving up 45 yards on the ground. So LSU's uh, rushing offense is going to have a bit of a time. But that game is always going to be a good game. I'm interested to see what that line looks like because I'm pretty sure if it's in a reasonable number, I'm taking LSU in the points. I just don't see how Arkansas's defense is going to stop Jaden Daniels. KJ Jefferson is an exciting guy in himself, but I just don't see where he has the type of weapons and the type of ability to execute as well as Jaden Daniels does. He's just operating at a whole different level. I mean, when you look at him going, what, 31 of 33, I'm sorry, 30 of 34 this game. And I mean, just cutting up the defense, whether it was the deep ball, it was dump ball, short, it was, shallow drags, crossing routes, uh, post corners, fades. He got Malik Neighbors on that touchdown pass that he got him to. It was a fade, one on one with the safety out of the slot. So it was just different type of throws that he was able to make and different type of plays that he was just able to make that was just so much better than what everybody else was able to do, that he just sticks out as the best player on the field. Speaking of best players, number 7, Will Campbell wears that badge on his jersey because, of course, an offensive lineman can't wear the single digits. But he had kind of a uncharacteristic play. He took a guy's helmet and threw it, kind of Kyle Turley-esque, like the announcer said in the game. So something must have ticked him off to the point where he took that 15-yard penalty, that personal foul, unnecessary roughness. But something must have ticked him off because Mississippi State was chirping a little bit this game, and I think that by these two teams being so close in proximity, being divisional opponents, things got kind of chippy. Harold Perkins Jr. and one of the offensive linemen had gotten into it after a play early on in the game, and both were assessed offsetting unnecessary roughness, personal foul penalties. So again, like I thought that it was going to be a chippy game, it was going to be a tough fought game. However, one team just came and brought it all game from opening kickoff to the final whistle. And Mississippi State just was overwhelmed and never really recovered from the first wave of LSU just dominating and pushing them around. So uh, we'll be back. I'll be back sometime Tuesday, Wednesday, middle of next week with some crosstalk with someone from Arkansas. Then we'll be back next game right after the Arkansas game to do the fifth quarter, as we call it now. So appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. I'm Jermaine Every from Death Valley Insider, and this has been the fifth quarter of the Mississippi State Bulldogs trouncing courtesy of the LSU Tigers.